We're going to get started right away. We are right now in our third week of this 3-week series. The first week we talked about what happened on the 17th of Tammuz, which is the day that initiates the 3 weeks of mourning. Then we spoke last week about what happened in the destruction of the first temple on the hands of the Babylonians. And now we are going to talk about what happened during the destruction of the second temple. And that opened up, of course, the exile that we, the Jewish people, still are in to this very day. Okay, so let's just do a little bit of historical background. The Jewish people, the first temple stood for 410 years. It was destroyed by the Babylonians. We covered that last week. The Babylonian exile lasted 70 years. Now, if you remember, we talked about how the Babylonian exile happened in different stages. The first stage was the exile of the elite, so to speak, the ruling class, the rabbis, the scholars. That happened 11 years before the exile of the remaining Jews. The 70 years started when the majority of the Jews were exiled. And after 70 years, they were allowed back. Who, of course, is the one... There's actually two different kings from the Persian Empire, because the Persians ended up taking over the Babylonians. The Babylonians destroyed the temple. They were punished by God. They lost their empire. It was taken over by the Persians. There was one Persian god who allowed the Jews to start rebuilding the temple. And then on the behest of Haman, the wicked provocateur from the story of Purim, he stopped that. He forbade the continuing of the building of the temple. He stopped the construction of the second temple. However, the king, who would then end up allowing the Jews back with full authority to go rebuild the second temple, would be, of course, the son of Queen Esther. So the Jews come back. By the way, very, very important footnote in history. When the Jews go back, they're finally allowed to go back to Israel. They're finally allowed after 70 plus years, depending on which wave of exile you were with. You're finally allowed back to Israel. What percentage of the Jews from Babylonia went back? Very small percent, about 10%. They went back with Ezra. Ezra gathered up. He wanted as many Jews as possible to go, but many Jews were comfortable in Babylonia. They're like, listen, I had a 30-year mortgage. I finally just paid it off. You want me to move now to Israel? You know what I'm saying? Not happening. I just made partner in my law firm. You want me to move to Israel? No. So unfortunately, really, really sadly, the majority of the Jews, even though they were now given the open ability, the open invitation, go back to your land, go back to your homeland, rebuild the temple, be able to be close to God once again, be able to come visit your Father in heaven on the 3 holy festivals in his home, the Beit HaMikdash. The majority of the Jews did not go back, which is why, interestingly enough, the Jews who lived in Iran, Iraq, and different parts of the Middle East, they're exiled. They've been out of Israel, so to speak, for over 2,500 years, roughly 2,500 years, 2,400 years. Whereas the Jews who were exiled by the Second Temple exile, they've been in exile for about 2,000 years. The Second Temple would be destroyed in the year 70 of the Common Era. Okay. So now the Jews go back to Jerusalem, they rebuild the temple, and the second temple was to stand for 420 years. Now, let me just make a quick blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. During the Second Temple era, is when the story of Hanukkah happens, right? During the Second Temple era is when the Greeks seize control and subjugate the Jewish people for roughly 180 years before the destruction. The Greeks, when they controlled the land of Israel, it was after Alexander the Great had died. His kingdom was split up between his generals, and one of them took over Israel and subjugated it to very harsh laws. Then there was the Hasmonean revolt, right? The Hashmonaim. They were Kohanim. They were from the priestly class. They overthrew the Greeks. That's when they lit the menorah and they had the miracle of Hanukkah. Very important but often unknown fact. is that the miracle of Hanukkah actually happens early in the Hasmonean Wars. The wars would continue on for another 14 years after the miracle of Hanukkah. The miracle of Hanukkah was not a happy ending. It was just an inspiration, a light that would carry them through the next 14 years of war, death, and destruction. At the end, the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, they were victorious. And what they should have done, they should have given the sovereignty right back to where it belongs, which is the Davidic line. Because God had said that the house of Judah, the Davidic line, should be the ones who will always retain the throne. As a matter of fact, as early back as Jacob's blessing to his children, he says, Lo Yasser Shevet Mi Yehuda, the rod of the sovereign. Kings in those days used to have a special royal rod they would hold. It was not supposed to leave the tribe of Judah from when it got there, which was the second king of Israel. The first king of Israel, of course, is King Saul. The second king is King David. And from the time it reaches David, it's not supposed to leave the Davidic line, the house of Judah ever. The Hasmoneans were not supposed to take control of the kingship, but they did. Things didn't work out well for them. Their entire house was subject to an uprising by a slave who massacred most of the family. The only person left was a young maiden who went up to the roof and said, I am the last remaining Hasmonean. I am the last remaining person in my family of Kohanim who have been ruling Israel. If anybody else comes and tells you that they're from the Hashmonaim, know that they are a slave, because I'm the last one. And she jumped off the roof. So that the bloodline, the slaves could not take her and then try to continue on the royal bloodline through her. King Herod, from the slaves, takes over Israel. Now, King Herod is maniacal and brilliant. One of the greatest builders the world had ever seen. We know about the great port of Caesarea, and he built Masada, which is an incredible feat of engineering. Why did he build Masada? Because he was psychotic. He really believed that everyone was coming to get him all the time. And one of the groups that he disliked was the rabbis. Because the rabbis, he knew, at the end of the day, did not recognize him as a valid king. Which he was not. He was from a family of slaves. So he wiped out almost every single rabbi in all of Israel. With the exception of one who was hidden by his wife, his wife was sisters with a sage, and she hid her brother, Shimon ben Shotach. Anyway, Herod ends up regretting terribly that he destroyed all the scholars. He says, what can I do to make up for it? It's not really much to do, right? You killed the light of the world. So Shimon ben Shotach says, well, rebuild the temple, because the temple is the light of the world. And King Herod makes an entire remodeling of the temple in Jerusalem and makes it into this astonishingly beautiful, incredible structure. When we go to the Kotel and we see those massive walls with stones that are tons and tons and tons and were carried there and brought there and quarried, that is only the retaining wall for what was a mountain. He basically took a mountain, Temple Mount, and shaved off the entire top of the mountain, creating a flat surface, because the mountain was, like a mountain. He shaved off the entire top, paved it out, graded it out to make it flat, built a massive retaining wall to keep the mountain exactly the way it was, flat on the top, and then inside of it, deep inside of it, was the temple. The temple was extraordinary, built with beautiful marbles. That was King Herod's contribution, both for the negative and the positive. There was another king from that same failed family, known as Agrippas. And he was really just a vassal of the Roman Empire. And it's during his time that the Second Temple will be destroyed. So just to get an understanding of sort of how things went chronologically. Another important point. The sages tell us that the first temple was destroyed because the people were engaging in the three cardinal sins: murder, idolatry, and adultery. The second temple was destroyed for a far different reason. Sinas chinam. Baseless hatred. God is our Father. And when we are sitting there and squabbling, hating each other, making petty fights with each other. Oh, I don't talk to those people. Those people are crazy. Those people are not even Jewish. Those people are this. Those people are that. And we start creating these divisions. God says, I don't want you to get out of my house. You're fighting? I don't want to see this. You're adults. Get out of my house. Go work it out. We're in the middle of that phase right now. We're in the middle of the get out of my house, go work it out. We still haven't worked it out. 2,000 years later. Mind you, 2,000 years of pain and suffering. Crusades and Holocausts and pogroms and inquisitions. Because we still can't figure out how to just work it out. The linchpin, the final story, the final display of hatred that caused the temple to be destroyed is the famous story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. There was a man in Jerusalem, a very wealthy and successful man, very connected with the rabbis and the politicians and the cream of the crop, the elite of the city. And he decided to throw a major bash. And he tells his servant, go out and invite my good buddy, Kamsa. But it so happened that the servant, he heard Buddy Kamsa, he thought he heard Bar Kamsa. There was another man in town whose name was Bar Kamsa. So when he was saying, go invite my buddy Kamsa, or whatever it was, he thought he heard, go invite my Bar Kamsa. He's like, okay, fine. I'll go invite Bar Kamsa. There's actually a cute little photo being, it's not cute, it's sad. There's this photo being circulated on the internet right now. It shows a picture of, it's like an iPhone, and the guy's writing in Hebrew, like, Al tishkach lazmin et Kamsa. Don't forget to invite Kamsa, and then the autocorrect changes it to Bar Kamsa. In any case, he invites the wrong person. He invites Bar Kamsa, who's this wealthy man's enemy. They come to the party. It's beautiful. It's delicious. They've got music, and they've got all the greatest sages and rabbis and scholars and politicians. And the host is walking around, being a good host, walking around and welcoming his guests, making sure everyone feels comfortable, when suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, or perhaps the middle of his eye, he notices Bar Kamsa, his enemy. And he comes over to Bar Kamsa and he says, what in the world are you doing here? Get out of my party. He says it a little bit loud. And Bar Kamsa is starting to get a little embarrassed because people are looking. So Bar Kamsa says, look, I got invited. Here's my invitation. He's like, I didn't invite you. Get out of here. And Bar Kamsa says, look, you're really embarrassing me now. Please just let me stay. Like, I don't want you to stay. I hate you. Get out of my party. He said, look, more people are looking. It's really embarrassing. I'll pay for whatever I eat today. I'll pay for my whole plate. Guys, I don't need your money. Get out of my party. It's getting louder. More people are looking. Look, this is just, please, you're really humiliating me. Please let me stay. I'll pay for half of your party. I don't need your money. I said, get out of my party. I will pay for your entire party. Just walk away and let me sit here. Don't push me out of here in front of all the greatest people, all the elite. The man says, I already told you I don't want your money. Security! The guards come, and they start dragging this man out. And as he's being dragged out, he sees, as he's being dragged out, all the elite, the rabbis, the scholars, the nobles, and they're all watching him. He's turning every color of the rainbow with embarrassment, and they haven't said a word. No one stuck up for him. No one said to the host, excuse me, this is a little bit inappropriate. Just let him stay. Don't be so petty. No one. He said, if this is what happens, and those are the leaders, and they didn't stick up for me, this whole people is not worth saving. I'm going to go, and I'm going to destroy this whole situation right here. And he goes to the emperor in Rome, and he says, the Jews are rebelling against you. What are you talking about? I've got great relationships with a lot of people there. No, the Jews are rebelling against you secretly. How do you know? He says, watch. Go tell them to bring an offering. Send an offering. The Jews in their temple, by the way, throughout all the years that we had the temple, we would bring offerings. If a non-Jew sent an offering, it wasn't like we said, no, you can't, it's only ours. No, we'd be happy to bring your offering for you. We actually brought offerings on behalf of the nations of the world. Every Sukkot, we would bring 70 bulls in descending order. 13 the first day, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, on behalf of the 70 root nations. And the Talmud says if the non-Jews of the world had known how much we were doing for them by the sacrifices that we brought on their behalf, they would send legionnaires to surround the temple, make sure no one comes to... There'd be a united nations at all times of 70 nations sending their soldiers to protect the temple. God forbid anybody should touch it if they would understand how much we were doing on their behalf by the offerings that we were bringing for them, not that they sent. We took our money. We spent our money to bring offerings on their behalf. But definitely if someone sent an offering, we would offer it. So the Caesar sends an offering, and what happens is this guy, Bar Kamsa, he basically makes a little nick in the lip or in the eyelid, very, very minor nick. Now, of course, an offering in the temple has to be pure and perfect and no blemishes and in perfect condition. And when it comes to Jerusalem, now the Romans, they don't care. They would bring an offering to their idol with a little nick. It's not a big deal. So they didn't even notice it. Like they saw, they sent a beautiful animal. Obviously, the Caesar's not going to send like a half dead animal like the conveyor belt at Tyson. Okay, no. So they bring it to Jerusalem. And there's a big conversation. What should we do? We should probably. So the sages, most of the sages were saying, just bring the offering. You don't want to anger the Caesar. And yes, it's a deficient offering, but at the end of the day, we don't want the wrath of the Caesar being brought down upon us. There was a great rabbi there named Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkilus. And he said, no. If we bring this offering, everyone's going to think that you could bring, subpar animals as offerings. I said, okay, what else can we do? They said, well, let's look at this Bar Kamsa guy. He's trying to get us all killed. He's literally trying to get us all killed. Let's kill Bar Kamsa. There is a rule. There's two rules in the Torah. Number one, if someone's trying to kill you, kill him first. Right? The words for it is habar lahargacha. If someone's coming to kill you, hashkem v'hargo. You get there earlier and kill him first. And furthermore, there's a concept when someone would inform on the Jewish people. This happened actually throughout the ages in Europe and in Russia. There would be certain people who would inform on other Jews, and they'd be thrown into prison, sometimes killed. And by using that power of being the government's informant, they would wield enormous power over the community. But the rule is actually that's the only time that you're allowed to, to this very day, we obviously don't have the death penalty anymore. We don't have the high court. There's no death penalty. There's no anything of that anymore. The only time where people are allowed to kill somebody is if he's doing this, if he's informing on other Jews to get them, unfairly, unjustly killed or hurt. And there were stories in Europe where they would follow the guy, because sometimes these people would be like they would look like a rabbi, oh yeah, of course. Let me tell you an amazing Dvar Torah, but then they'd go out and go inform to the authorities, or this Jew's cheating on his, taxes, even though he wasn't, or he was, because the taxes in those days were so, chokeholding that you would not have enough food left for your family if you paid all your taxes or whatever it was. And we'd get these Jews thrown in prison, killed, etc., etc. So there were times actually where the community would get together and, let's put it this way, when the man would go into the mikvah, he wouldn't come out. And that's just simply self-protection. So the rabbis were saying, we should kill this Bar Kamsa. He's trying to kill our entire people. Who spoke up? Rabbi Zechariah, the son of Avkilus. He said, no. If you kill him now, people are going to say, if you bring a blemished sacrifice to the temple, you get killed for it. So they ended up sending him away with the offering, and the Caesar sent a group to destroy Jerusalem. And later they say it was one of the factors, and of course there's a million factors, but one of the factors, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulis' extra piety was a real factor in the destruction of the temple. Sometimes you got to know when to put the extra piety away. Okay, in any case, the Roman Caesar sent a general named Nero. And this general named Nero, he wanted to use divinations, similar to what we spoke about last week. He wanted to use divinations to see if he'd be successful. So he shot an arrow to the east, and the arrow turned itself around and sped to Jerusalem. To the north, the arrow turned itself around and sped towards Jerusalem. No matter which way he shot an arrow, it would turn itself around and speed towards Jerusalem. So he met a young child, a young Jewish kid, and he said to me, "Tell me, boy, what did you learn today in school?" And the boy said, "I learned a verse. It says, 'I will give my revenge against Edom through my people Israel.'" Edom was the Roman people. So the kid said, "I learned a verse in Ezekiel that says, 'I will give my revenge against Edom, against the Romans, through my people Israel.'" And Nero said, "Wait a second. God wants me to destroy the temple, but then he's going to hold me accountable and take the revenge against me? No way." He actually ran away and converted to Judaism. And one of his descendants was the great Rabbi Meir, who a huge chunk of the Mishnah, which is the first basic building blocks of the oral law, is actually written by Rabbi Meir. Almost all anonymous Mishnahs are attributed to Rabbi Meir, the descendant of Nero, the Roman general. Next, the Roman emperor sent Vespasian, another general, to attack Jerusalem. He laid siege on Jerusalem on all four sides. He brought troops from 4 different countries. One of Arabs, one of Philistines, one from Alexandria, and one from Africa. The siege around Jerusalem lasted 3 years. Now there were 3 wealthy people living in Jerusalem. Their names were Nakdimon ben Gurion, ben Kalba Savua, and ben Tzitzis Haketzas. Nakdimon ben Gurion was called that because the sun shone for him. He was a very wealthy man. When the Jews needed, it was a long story, the Jews were desperate for water, there was a major drought, and he put up as collateral enormous amounts of money from a Roman noblewoman who basically lent the Jewish people water so they wouldn't die of thirst. And it was a whole story. It was the water had to be, her cisterns had to be refilled by a certain date, or else this wealthy man would lose all this money that he had put up as collateral. And then basically the sun is setting, and she's like, "Oh, look, the money's mine." And then basically after the sun seemed to have already set, like the sun came back and it rained like crazy and filled up the cisterns. So the sun shone before him. The word shone is nakda. The shemesh was nakda. His name was called Nakdimon ben Gurion for that valiant act. Ben Kalba Savua literally translates as the son of the satisfied dog, because any man who would come to his house as hungry as a dog would leave satisfied. And the last one, Ben Tzitzis Haketzas, which literally translates as the son of the mat tzitzis, because he was so wealthy that wherever he would go, they would roll out carpets for him, so that his tzitzis, which were very long, you know, the tzitzis are the tassels that we wear, like these little stringies over here, he wore them very long and low, and they would never drag on the floor, because wherever he went, his handlers, his associates, whatever, would roll out carpets in front of him, so that he was always walking on beautiful silk carpets, and they would leave them behind for the poor. Another opinion is that Ketzas means like the throne. He was very involved with the Roman nobility. He was very close with them, and supposed to be a big advocate on behalf of the Jews. They were very wealthy. One of them said, "I've got enough in my storehouses to supply the Jewish people with wheat and barley for 21 years. All the people here in Jerusalem under siege. The second one said, "I have enough wine, salt, and oil to supply the people for the next 21 years. And the third one said, "I have enough wood to give them heating wood and wood so they can bake their food for the next 21 years. By the way, who do the sages say was the greatest contribution? Who said the wood? That's right. Why?
You can't do anything else without the wood.
Well, I mean, theoretically you could, right? Because you could eat barley and wheat raw. But because it takes like 60 measures of wood to bake 1 measure of bread, right? Think about how much wood gets consumed in the production of bread or whatever else you're making. Okay, so Jerusalem's looking like it's sitting pretty. It's sitting tight. We can do this. We can outlast. We'll be in siege. We have massive, strong walls. And we have enough here to make it through 21 years. We've got food, we've got beverage, we've got oil, we've got wood. We're okay. Except for the fact that they weren't okay. Why? There was a group amongst the Jews who were known as the Biryonim, the Zealots, the fierce-like warriors. And their attitude was, we're not going to sit here and wait this out. Those Romans, they want to besiege us. We'll show them. We're the children of God. We're going to go out to fight them. The rabbi said to them, do not go out to fight them. It is not a fortuitous time. We are not behaving on the level that we are going to merit God's special protection. Do not go out and fight the Romans. The majority of the people were following the rabbis. The Zealots couldn't handle that. So what do? In an attempt to ensure that the Jewish people would be forced to fight, they burned down all the storehouses of wheat and barley and wine and salt and oil and wood. And now the Jews start to starve. It got so serious that even the wealthiest of Jews were left without food. There was a woman whose name was Martha, the son of Baisos, Martha bas Baisos. When she got married, both her father and father-in-law were so wealthy that they each pledged 1,000,000 gold coins for her ketubah, for her prenuptials. 1,000,000 gold coins from the father-in-law, and 1,000,000 gold coins from the father. So she was wealthy beyond comprehension. So she's sitting in her house, and she says to her servant, "Go out to the market, get me, a measure of the finest flour. We'll have waffles tonight." And the servant comes back. He's like, "I'm so sorry, but I went to the market. They didn't have any fine flour. They had that coarse flour." She's like, "Okay, get me coarse flour. We'll have multigrain waffles tonight." He goes out. He comes back 10 minutes later. He says, "No, they're already out of coarse flour. They only have bran." She's like, "Okay, get me bran." He comes back 10 minutes later. He says, "They don't have any bran anymore. All they have is barley." In those days, barley was considered animal food. That's generally used as an animal feed. She says, "Go get me barley." He goes out. He comes, "Sorry, they don't have any barley anymore." "Get me anything. Go out and get me some food. I'm hungry. I'm starving over here." He goes out. Can't find anything in the markets. That's how fast. There was a run on the markets. They knew that all the storehouses had been burned up, and there was nothing. Nothing left in the markets. Martha bas Baisos, this incredibly, incredibly wealthy woman of the most fine background, from the wealthiest family, both on her side and her husband's side, she says, "What am I going to eat? I haven't eaten all day." She goes outside and she finds one bit of food in the marketplace. On the floor, she finds a fig that had been sucked on by Rabbi Tzadok. We'll get to Rabbi Tzadok in a moment and why he was sucking on figs. But he had been very ill. So that's all the food she could find. She's like, "Okay, you got to rough it sometimes, right?" And she decides to eat the fig. But when she starts to eat it, she's so delicate. She had been such a pampered person her whole life. And there was especially an incredibly foul odor because Rabbi Tzadok was very, very ill. We'll get to why he had been ill and what happened to him. That she became so nauseated that she got sick. And it basically put her right on a collision course with death. As she was dying, and she knew she was dying, she goes into her house and she takes out her money. And she's already by now starting to get delirious and mad, and I don't mean mad as in angry, but mad as in she's going out of her mind, she's losing her mind, and she's dying, she's sick, and she's repulsed in her stomach, and everything's going nuts, and she just starts throwing all of her money into the street saying, "Who needs money? What is money going to do for us? We're all going to die." And she dies. The wealthiest of the wealthy dying of starvation. Now let me tell you something. When you meet a Holocaust survivor, obviously every single Holocaust survivor, and we have one right here, Abe, our hero, our local hero. Every single Holocaust survivor is a hero beyond comprehension. They are the treasures of the Jewish people. They are our crown jewels. And it's fascinating to hear the stories that different people say, and especially if they're asked, what was the most visceral thing they saw the entire time? And interestingly enough, it's very rarely a beating. Beatings were so common that it's not a beating or something is usually not the most visceral thing someone saw. So a rabbi that I know was once walking in Borough Park in Brooklyn, and it was Shabbos afternoon. It was right around the time of the third meal, Sudash Lishit, and most synagogues have like a little meal, like communal meal for the third meal. So he's walking, he steps into a shtibel, and he has the third meal with them. And while they were there was a Holocaust survivor, and they were asking him, and they were talking to him, and someone asked him, what was the most visceral thing that he saw? And he said he remembers when he was in the ghetto. He says there was a guy in the ghetto next to him who was extraordinarily wealthy, right? There are people, there were people who were worth the equivalent today of what would be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, but when it came time to the ghetto, they were all shoved into the ghetto, the same. And he said they were in the middle of cleaning out the ghetto, and this man knew they were coming for him, and he didn't have much time to live. And I'm walking through the apartment building, and I see his door is open, and I see he's in the bathroom. And in his hands are stacks of $100 bills. And he's tearing them up and flushing them down the toilet, saying, you're not going to get my money. The exact same story. I mean, shocking, chilling. The exact same story still happening 1900 years after it happened the first time. The wealthiest of the wealthy, on their way to their death, throwing out their money and saying, look, this can't do anything for you. What happened to Rabbi Tzadok? What was the story of Rabbi Tzadok? Rabbi Tzadok was a very righteous man. And he saw that the temple was going to be destroyed. There were signs 40 years in advance that the temple was going to be destroyed. And one of them was that the gates of the sanctuary just opened on their own. It was as if God was saying, you can't force me open. If I get destroyed, it's because I allowed you in. Not because you have a superior army or any kind of strength. No army's strength in the world is anything in the face of an infinite, all-powerful God. So the sanctuary's gates opened up. They opened wide, saying, look, I'm going to allow the attackers in. Rabbi Tzadok, when he saw this and he knew that the temple was going to be destroyed, he started fasting. And for 40 years he fasted. Only drinking or eating minimal amounts at night, to the point where he was so emaciated that anything he would eat, you would see it going through him. There's a whole story about how Rabbi Yochanan, we'll get to this soon also, hopefully Rabbi Yochanan was able to arrange for Rabbi Tzadok to get rehabilitated. But he was so weak. It's like, of course we all know that at the end of the Holocaust, and to me this is beyond sad. So many Jews who survived the Holocaust, who survived Auschwitz, who survived Bergen-Belsen, died after being liberated because the American soldiers gave them candy bars, not knowing that their systems just simply could not handle that after all these years of starvation. So Rabbi Tzadok had been fasting for 40 years, and when it came time, Rabbi Yochanan was able to arrange reprieve for him. So they got him the best doctors, the Romans, we'll see why. The Romans got him the best doctors. And how did they bring him back to life? At first, they just gave him liquid. Like they gave him water, but they soaked wheat in the water. So the water had a bunch of proteins in it, not proteins, but the starch. And then they would give it to him a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and thicker. And then eventually they would give him a fig, and he couldn't actually eat the whole fig, but he could just sort of suck on the inside, where all the seeds are and the sweetness, and he would suck on it, and then he would have to discard. He couldn't eat a full fig. And that was one of the figs that Marta, the daughter of Baisos, the wealthiest of the wealthy, ate and died from. The famine became more and more severe. At first, the Jews would lower down baskets of gold and treasure, and the Romans outside would bring up a basket of wheat. And they said, we're going to stop giving wheat. We'll give them, bran. And then we'll stop giving bran, we gave them barley, and eventually the Jews were just lowering down baskets of gold every day with the hope that someone would send something back up, and nothing was coming back. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was a great sage who lived during that time, he saw what was going on. And he was moaning and crying publicly like this. Look what the zealots did. They're killing us. They killed us. You know, it's fascinating, because history always repeats itself. The greatest destroyers of the Jewish people have always been the Jewish people. Throughout all of history, back to the Biryonim, the zealots, who destroyed all the food. In the Holocaust, the Judenrat. And I don't know if you know this, but there were many Jews who were pro the Nazi party in the beginning. Do you know that? Yes, they said he was powerful. And yeah, he talks crazy about the Jews, but yeah, you have to understand, the Jews were coming from hundreds of years of anti-Semitism. Like a king or a ruler getting up and talking bad about the Jews was not any astonishing thing. Now his rhetoric was a little bit intense, and yes, the Jews will tell you that. But you know what? We're gonna help him get into power, and then we'll use our political influence to calm him down. During the Holocaust, you know, I just very interesting. A mother asked me to take her and her 12-year-old son and her sister and her 14-year-old son on a tour of the Holocaust Center here, and I did. And I just actually came back from Poland. And we were talking about the complicity of everyone in the Holocaust. There are pictures that I have seen of U.S. bombs over Auschwitz, taken from the camera that was on every U.S. bomber. Pictures of literally U.S. bombs dropping over Auschwitz. Now, those pictures were taken from very high up. A plane is traveling at 500 miles an hour and it drops bombs. The bombs are going to continue moving because of inertia. They keep moving forward. So whenever a bomber drops bombs, they always have to drop it, keeping in mind where it's going to land. It's not going to land where they drop it. It doesn't just like plunk down. It's moving at 500 miles an hour. It gets released, so it moves forward. Those U.S. bombs were not there to bomb Auschwitz, or the railroad lines to Auschwitz, or the crematoria in Auschwitz, or the gas chambers in Auschwitz. They were there to bomb the factories of A.G. Farber that were a few miles away from Auschwitz. But the fact that you see those pictures with U.S. bombs over Auschwitz tells you that they easily could have bombed Auschwitz. Could have easily bombed hundreds of different places where the railroad lines led to Auschwitz and stopped the trains bringing trainloads and trainloads of Jews to their death every single day. They didn't. You know why? Because FDR, who was so beloved to the Jews here, by the way. I don't know if you know this, but FDR, Roosevelt, he was like a god. The Jews used to say there's three worlds. There's Heintigewelt, this world, there's the next world, and there's the Heintigewelt, I don't know how to say the next world in Yiddish, the Himmelwelt, and Roosevelt. The Jews loved FDR. FDR had orders on his desk, and all he had to do was sign them, and it would have ground to a halt the death machine, the death factory known as Auschwitz. He didn't. Let me tell you more. While we're at it, who else is complicit in the death of 6 million Jews? The other 6 million Jews living in diaspora. While the Holocaust was going on in Germany, there were Jews and organizations that were running around America. And they had worked out all kinds of deals with the Germans to be able to buy out, literally buy souls. And they would go around begging people, what will you donate? $100 buys a soul. What are you going to give? Nothing. Some of the biggest Jewish organizations at that time were building libraries and campuses, spending millions and millions of dollars, building interfaith dialogue programs and libraries, millions of dollars. When they were asked, please, you'll build the library after the war. There are thousands of people being killed every day. That's not where our interests lie right now. That's not where our interests lie right now. You know, we think about the Holocaust. The number is 6 million, right? Obviously, we all know. None of us can comprehend that number. What was the most horrific day in recent American history? 9/11. How many people died in 9/11? About 3,000. There was a 9/11 every single day for 5.5 years straight. To try to get an idea of what a Holocaust was, what 6 million people were. 9/11 every single day without cessation for 5.5 years. And when Jewish people who are spending millions building new campuses and new libraries, and a soul is being sold for $100, that's not where our interests lie right now. We're all complicit. We're all complicit. The Talmud says, any generation in which the temple is not rebuilt, it's as if it was destroyed in that generation. Why? Because if we were worthy of the temple being here, it would be here. If we were not worthy of the temple being here, and the temple was here right now, it would get destroyed. It's a simple equation. Either we're worthy of being able to live in God's home with each other in peace, or we're not. So in that sense, we're all complicit. And that's sort of the message of the 9 days and Tisha B'Av. We have a job to do. We have repairing to do. We have a lot of fixing. And forget about Tikkun Olam for a moment. Right? Tikkun Olam, you know, when you try to get everything, you get nothing. Forget about Tikkun Olam for a moment. How about just Tikkun Yisrael? Mending the relationships between the Jewish people. The reason why the temple was destroyed, the reason why we went into this horrific exile was not because there was pollution and there was people weren't recycling enough and there was too much trash on Everest and it needs a cleanup Tikkun Olam project. No. The reason why we're here in this exile is because we did not get along with each other. Because we were petty and we talked bad about each other and we talked behind other people's backs, and we hated each other, and we disinvited that one, and said, don't hang out with this one, and I don't want those people, that synagogue, you hear what the rabbi said? Forget about Tikkun Olam. Let's do Tikkun Yisrael. Let's mend our relationships, because that's the job of the 9 days. In any case, wow, we are out of time.
You have 5 minutes.
We are out of time. I'll tell you 2 things, a few ideas. The Roman general that would end up destroying the temple was a general named Titus. Okay? Titus. You can go today to Rome, and you can see the Arch of Titus, and it shows on the carved into the marble, because the tradition back then was when a general was victorious in war, they would build him this massive arch, and he would ride through it in victory on his way back. That was sort of like where they would celebrate his victory. Titus, when the temple was being destroyed again, they breached the walls on the 17th of Tammuz. They spilled into the city. The amount of bloodshed that was spilled is literally it was like another Holocaust. Millions of people. They get into the temple, and the Roman soldiers are carousing about, blaspheming, bringing offerings to their pagan gods. But Titus is not done yet. Titus goes to the Holy of Holies, and the Holy of Holies had a curtain separating between the regular temple, the holy, and the Holy of Holies. And Titus takes out, draws his sword, and sticks it into the parochas, the beautiful tapestry that was separating the 2 rooms, and blood starts to come out. And of course, Titus, instead of saying, wow, there's a miracle there, I should be a little bit nervous about some god who can make blood just materialize out of a curtain, instead says, aha! I killed the Jewish god. He takes down the parochas, lays it on the floor, brings in a harlot, commits obscene acts with her on this parochas, on the holy curtain, the tapestry that divides between the Holy of Holies and the Holy, in view of the Aron, not the Aron, there was no Aron in the temple, but in full view of everybody. He says, look, I beat the Jewish God. As Titus is going back to Rome, he's on a ship, on a Roman galley, And suddenly a terrible, terrible, terrible squall, terrible storm comes. And the ship is being tossed like a matchstick. And Titus looks up to heaven and says, "Ha ha, God of the Jews, look at you. All your might is on the waters. When the people of the world were disobeying, what do you make? You make a flood. When the Egyptians were oppressing your people, what do? You drown them in the ocean. I think you're pretty weak on land. Your whole strength is only in the water. And now I burnt down your temple. You're going to get me in the water? How about you come and fight me on land where I have my troops, where I can beat you, where I beat you before?" The waters go still. And a voice comes out from heaven and says, "Titus, you fool. You will come up onto dry land and you will do battle with me, but I won't send any big creatures. I'm not going to send my lions and tigers. I'm going to send the smallest little creature, a flea, a gnat. Let's see you do war with my gnat." He comes up on dry land. Titus steps foot on dry land, and a little tiny gnat flies into his nose, crawls up into his brain, and starts eating at his brain. And for the rest of his life, Titus had a parasite eating away at his brain. The pain was excruciating. By the time Titus died, they autopsied his body, and the gnat was the size of a bird. For the rest of his life, Titus, the great victor who thought he beat God, lived out the rest of his physical life in extraordinary, extraordinary pain. And on his deathbed, he left in his will, he said, "Burn up my ashes and scatter them everywhere around the world. I just don't want to be found again by the Jewish God and punished." Of course, not a great solution. But the point is that those who oppose the Jewish people, they get their own. One last idea, though, and then we'll conclude. The sages tell us that Mashiach, the Messiah that will end this bitter exile, his birthday is Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av. The month of Av, the saddest month in the Jewish calendar, what does the word Av mean? We are now in the month of Av, Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. What does the name Av mean? Father. Loving Father. We are familiar with the famous story, the parable. This guy goes up to heaven, and he goes up and he sees his whole life sort of unfolding. It looks like him walking down a beach, and there's 2 sets of footsteps, and he says, "God, what are those 2 sets of footsteps?" And God says, "That's me walking beside you your whole life." And then they get to certain points in his life where it's the hardest, most difficult times, and he sees there's only 1 set of footsteps, and he says, "God, why did you leave me in my most difficult times?" And God says, "I didn't leave you. That's when I scooped you up in my arms and carried you." The Jewish people, we've been through some very, very horrific things, and specifically in this month. But the reality is this is the month where God is shielding us. Where God is saying, if you were any other nation in the world doing what you're doing, you would be gone. Should I tell you how I know that? Because all the other nations are gone. Where are the Romans and the Greeks and the Persians and the Babylonians and the ancient Egyptians? They're all gone. God says, if you were any other nation, you'd be gone. But you know what? I'll take your blows. Burn down my house. But make sure they stay alive. So as much as the destruction of the 2 temples and the going to exile look like the very worst things, in a way, it's God saying, I'll absorb the arrows. The Jewish people are acting in such a way that naturally they should cease to exist as a nation. But instead, God says, take me. Take my house. Let all the anger be poured out on my sticks and stones, my building, my gold and silver. But make sure that my people are still here. And we are still here. And not only are we still here, but we're still yearning to come back to the temple. We're still yearning to get back to that time, the Messianic era, when the world will be filled with knowledge of God, when no one will lift a finger against a Jew. Because they will know that we are the princes and princesses of the world who clung to God despite going through 2,000 years of exile. We have not walked away. We're still here. We still love God. We still cling to God. We hold on to Him despite the nations of the world hating us, making resolutions against us, making holocausts against us. We're still here. Everyone in this room is still here. And our children will continue it on, and their children will continue it on forever and ever. Because just like God doesn't abandon us, we don't abandon Him. And it's the times of our deepest pain and deepest suffering, Tisha B'Av, when we truly mourn the temple, when we truly recognize what it is that we lost when our people were banished from God's home, when we truly want to get back, that is indeed the seeds of the Messiah. When we all stand forward and say, I'm going to fight this year to Tikkun Yisrael, to bring the Jewish people back together, to do whatever I can, to increase the love between one another, so that God will say, come back. When we use the pain of Tisha B'Av to spur us on to what we all can do, that is the very seeds, that is the birth of the Messiah. May we merit that there not be a Tisha B'Av this year, but if there is one, that it be the very final Tisha B'Av. That we all be spurred on to achieving our own greatness and bringing the Jewish people back together again, so that God will come say, come back to me, and we will experience the glorious, the final, the eternal redemption. Thank you very much.
Amen.